If you're like me, you've probably noticed that nostalgia is usually only skin deep. Once you peel away the immediate gratification of something warm and familiar, there's usually not much left beneath the surface. And despite my urge to do so, for the longest time I refused to review this film until I thought enough time had passed. I wanted to judge this story on its merits and not on my rose-tinted love for it and the franchise it represented. I wanted to know if Akira Toriyama's third outing into the movie world was as great as I thought it was. I wanted to peel away the surface-level nostalgia to see if there was something of substance within Toei Animation's greatest box office smash hit. Looking into the story, the music, and the visuals, I wanted to write an honest review for the 2018 film Dragon Ball Super: Broly. As I was growing up, I never really enjoyed the Dragon Ball movies. I would always give them a shot, but they never captured my interest the same way the anime did. While trying to watch these films, I always thought that they were rushed, unearned versions of the anime's story in miniature. The visuals and action sequences looked really cool across the board, but the story seemed secondary, and because of that, it never really interested me. In fact, I didn't end up seeing all of these to the end until TFS redid them decades later. That is, until Battle of Gods and Resurrection F changed everything. We now had standalone stories that worked as films. Battle of Gods was the first Dragon Ball film I enjoyed beginning to end, and Resurrection F was fun on first viewing at the very least, despite it being a less enjoyable film to me overall. And needless to say, with Dragon Ball Super's anime over and a new film slated on the horizon, I was more than excited. Then it was announced to be a Broly movie, which had a lot of folks like myself worried. A character like Broly taking center stage was nothing new to the Dragon Ball films, and to be perfectly honest, I saw him always as a condensed version of everything I hated about those old Dragon Ball films. All appearance, no substance. But primarily what made me anxious, and many others, was the prospect of making a character like Broly canon. However, soon after, much of the negative hearsay surrounding the film vanished as Toriyama made a formal announcement reassuring us all that he was rewriting Broly's character as well as handling the film script personally. Additionally, 3 interesting and impressive trailers dropped, demonstrating some incredible visuals with the promise of an interesting origin story. But did it live up to that promise? The beginning of this film is extremely efficient, streamlined, and surprisingly accessible for the 20th film in a franchise that spans decades. And while there are tons of tiny nods to past events, technologies, and lore for the longtime fans to enjoy, the film takes specific care in establishing the key players and motivations of the film being told. Beginning with a flashback 41 years in the past, we are greeted with shots of the Frieza Force in its heyday. The Ginyu, Zarbon, Dodoria, King Cold, and a young Frieza are all present. Taking place in the Saiyan homeworld before its destruction, this is the first look we get at the society of the Saiyans written by Akira Toriyama in animation. And it's honestly terrific. There's a tremendous sense of scale and awe as King Cold's army arrives on planet Vegeta. This is the single most important moment of the Saiyans' history up until this point, and we feel that in the dialogue that's delivered, the spectacular angles on display, and the expressions of the people. It's the perfect place to start this film, and it's the event that triggers every major choice that drives this story forward from here on in. Immediately, it's instantly recognizable that the visuals have underwent a significant upgrade. From the wobbly outlines, vibrant colors, lighting, and nostalgic character designs, this film feels and looks more like Dragon Ball than anything that's been released in the last 10 years at least. Bringing characters closer to how the original artist envisioned them, enhancing their expressions and personalities through exaggerated movements and close-ups. It's honestly a feast for the eyes that you can only fully appreciate when watching it for yourself. The first scene acts as a passing of the torch and a coronation of sorts for Frieza as he accepts his father's position as the leader of his forces, immediately setting a ruthless and sinister tone, effortlessly brushing aside the Saiyans' plans to stop him with a simple tech demonstration. Humiliated and frustrated, we follow King Vegeta as he visits his son in the nursery, with the hopes that he, one day, will carry out his revenge on Frieza. With a father impressing motivations like this, it's easy to see how Vegeta's childhood made him the man he is today. However, this isn't Vegeta's scene. It's Broly's. Revealed as a lower-class warrior with an exceptionally high battle potential, the exposition Broly receives is incredibly natural and believable as the doctors try to justify his placement in this particular nursery to the king. All the while, he struggles to accept the fact that his son might not be the best choice to overthrow Frieza. And this is the film's strength. The motivations established in these early scenes drive and inform the subsequent ones in natural and believable ways. King Vegeta is threatened by Broly upstaging his son and being a danger to the Saiyan race. Therefore, he is exiled ultimately to a remote planetoid called Vampa. Broly's father Paragus naturally takes issue with this and immediately flees after his son to save him, breeding a lifelong grudge that ultimately becomes the driving force for all the conflict in the second half of this film. The visuals of Broly landing on Vampa act as a small OP for the film. Stunning visuals, lighting, color, and music, concluding with the single best title drop I've ever seen in a Dragon Ball film. There's just something so satisfying about it. We are only 10 minutes into the film and we have already established all of this. This is honestly excellent pacing. In traveling to Vampa, Paragus commandeers a ship piloted by another Saiyan called Beats that regrettably gets wrapped up in all of this. However, once they find Broly, they realize that the escape pod they used to get to planet Vampa was irreversibly damaged in the crash, removing all options of leaving the planet thereafter. Once Paragus discovers that there's no way out, he immediately removes Beats from the equation to save food, as cold-heartedly as you can imagine, shooting a laser straight through the Saiyan's chest. This is where we leave Broly's story for the time being, and move some years into the future, where we find the first controversial section of the film. The following 10 minutes cover the events derived from a one-shot manga written and illustrated by Akira Toriyama called Dragon Ball Minus. When screenshots from trailers suspiciously similar to Minus surfaced online, a wave of worry swelled across the fan base that was palpable. But to be perfectly honest, it plays out much better than I first expected it to, at least. With that said, there are some negative takeaways from this section, the most glaring of which being Goku's true origin. While it works incredibly well within this film and significantly better than in Minus's comic, it's still difficult not to constantly see the Superman parallels once you first notice it. The film does make considerable efforts to integrate new elements of the Dragon Ball story into the classic canon, succeeding fantastically in some cases while not so much in others. For everything else in the scene, it works exceptionally well. Even instances in the Minus comic that I disliked, like Bardock's suspicion of Frieza, made much more sense here than it did in the manga, giving legitimate, believable grounds for him to suspect something of Frieza, rather than him just having an unexplained feeling. Additionally, this is one of the first scenes that works substantially better having prior knowledge of the series. After being introduced to the Elite Saiyan nursery that housed Vegeta and Broly, Goku's situation is far more modest. There's something heartwarming and special about it, kept locked away in an old capsule at the back of their house. No one, not even his parents, knowing what he will do with his life. Moments like that, accompanied by the stunning visuals and breathtaking, heartbreaking scores, lift this section of the film higher than my wildest dreams ever expected. In a surprisingly touching scene, Goku is sent off the doomed planet by his parents. Frieza charges his blast, Bardock's prediction comes to pass, and we're greeted by a montage of moments from Goku's life as both he and Vegeta fight into the present day. Easily missed in this quick flash of iconic moments is a young Broly minding his own business, surviving, as both Goku and Vegeta get to experience their lives. This is a film about these three characters and how their fates have been, in some shape or form, connected. A large criticism people have thrown this film's way has been its exclusion of fan-favorite characters like Gohan and Piccolo. And while I do love these characters, I think the decision to keep the cast focused and uncluttered granted the film the breathing room it needed to flesh out this story. But it's not without its flaws, and I'll get to that. With that, we are almost 30 minutes into the story, and this is where I start seeing things that bothered me slightly. Small things admittedly, but they still exist. Essentially, to get all of these major players in the same area to fight one another, the Dragon Balls become involved. Frieza appoints men to steal them from Bulma's place, which they do with ease because plot needs to happen, and naturally, Goku and Vegeta are conveniently not there to intervene. Additionally, and also conveniently, Bulma only gathered 6 Dragon Balls, which gives Goku and Vegeta a means of tracking them down before they find the last one. This, honestly, is all very contrived and is pretty weak storytelling. Thankfully, the means with which Broly and Paragus are rescued from Vampa makes much more sense in the context of its story, characters, and themes. Chilai and Lemo, 2 new characters introduced for this story, are recruits within the Frieza Force tasked with locating strong power signatures to recruit into the Frieza Force. Thus far, every scene concerning Broly has been this film's strongest aspect, as honestly it should be. He is the titular character after all. And thankfully, this praise train continues as he builds a wonderful relationship with Lemmo and the wonderful Cheelai. And all of these scenes where Broly interacts with Frieza, his father, Cheelai, and the crew of the ship are fantastic. Through the revelation of his past as well as his father's cruelty, we develop a deep sympathy for him and the situation he has grown up with. It's revealed that Broly has been controlled using a shock collar. This is an interesting idea that comes with some tragic visuals both from the act of shocking Broly himself and the expressions on his face once he sees the remote that turns the collar on. But what doesn't make sense to me is why he just doesn't take the collar off. I mean, he already, in a calm state, has a power level in excess of 100,000 according to Cheelai's scouter, so I think he can break some metal around his neck. Now that aspect of the film did bother me quite a bit, especially when you consider that it's a vital part of what makes or breaks the film, but I digress. In an effort to protect Broly from his father's cruelty, Cheelai steals the remote Paragus uses to restrain his son, as both the forces of Frieza and Earth set themselves on a collision course. It's now only a matter of time before all three main characters clash for the first time, fated for this meeting. This fight goes on for almost 40 minutes, and it's not only the best Dragon Ball has ever looked, but it's one of the most visually impressive sequences of animation I have ever seen. The ridiculous amount of effort that went into this film, if it wasn't clear before, it most certainly should be now. And while I'm sure many of you will be familiar with this fight, I'm going to try to break it down and maybe point out a few things here and there that you might have missed. The fight itself can be divided into 3 sections, with each section serving a particular purpose within the story. Broly versus Vegeta to kick things off, Broly versus Goku that takes up the middle section, and finally Gogeta versus Broly to end everything. And it just so happens that each of these 3 sections focuses on the unique strengths of each individual fight. For instance, a Vegeta fight is most entertaining when he is styling on his opponent and in control of the action. We don't often get to enjoy sequences like this, but when Vegeta receives the first punch from Broly and gives us that cheeky grin, we know what's coming and we know how good this is going to be. The Vegeta fight takes up about 8 minutes of the overall fight's runtime, and Yuya Takahashi is in charge of this section, within which we get to enjoy the shock fall across the faces of both Broly and Paragus as Vegeta introduces the Super Saiyan and Super Saiyan God transformations to the fight. And my god, are they handled beautifully. I specifically love the Super Saiyan transformation, as he begins to glow, refusing to let go of Broly's hand, before being enveloped in a massive golden aura with the camera panning 360 degrees around his stance. It's beautiful. This fight, however, serves one important purpose. Primarily, to bring Broly up to speed both figuratively and literally with the level of combat the main cast is on. Through breathtakingly beautiful tracking shots, Broly slowly gains the upper hand on Vegeta until he finally overpowers the Saiyan Prince before losing his mind. The fight from here quickly shifts focus to Goku and Broly. Again, the script clearly understands that Vegeta's most fun to watch when he's performing in a dominant fashion, and Goku is most interesting when he's on the back foot, and thus this transition came at the perfect time. This Goku section is handled primarily by animator Ryo Onoshi, who was also the artist that animated the very first teaser released for Dragon Ball Super Broly, and demonstrates some really experimental animation that I really enjoyed. Where the Vegeta fight established all the regular things we've come to expect from the series in a fantastic fashion, Goku's fight introduces new takes on the franchise through its music selection, animation, and lore. The music up until this point of the film has been phenomenal. However, much of the battle tracks are something you will either love or hate. Sumitomo, the man responsible for the music of the film, felt inspired by the live event gatherings in Latin America during the final episodes of Dragon Ball Super, and so wanted to add chanting and a hype man, for lack of a better term, to the tracks in this section. I enjoyed the experimental nature of it, and if nothing else, it's most certainly memorable. From an animation perspective, we got to enjoy a first-person tracking shot perspective, the likes of which I honestly never seen before in Dragon Ball. I thought it was a fun idea and worked well in this long fight to help break up the monotony of the action, but wasn't majorly impressed and could even see a lot of people missing this sequence if you weren't looking for it. The fight itself lasts about 12 minutes in total for Broly and Goku. It has some interesting new techniques and even has an explosive Super Saiyan Blue transformation in the middle of things. It does have a few moments of CGI here and there, but with the battle itself being almost 40 minutes long, I'm willing to forgive the little CGI that was involved. In fact, I'd even go as far as to say that in many other aspects of the film, CGI was used to enhance sequences beyond what it would have been without it, through backgrounds, special effects, and filters. Amidst all of this action and explosion, Paragus, now injured from being too close, reveals to Frieza that Broly must be at his limit now. Fortunately, Frieza has the perfect contingency plan. Apart from it being a magnificent scene rich in character for Frieza, it's also an almost mirror image of how Paragus casually killed Beats in cold blood earlier in the film. Due to the sudden loss of his father, Broly, overcome with grief, begins to transform, during which there's an incredible shot of Frieza standing front and center, surrounded by flames and destruction, all of his own doing. Something of interest also during this cut is that Broly blasts his father's body away, out of view, never to be seen again in the film. With the situation now more dire than ever, Vegeta rejoins the fight in what is a surprisingly effective CGI sequence. Some terrific angles, backgrounds, choreography, and even angles we wouldn't normally see in traditional 2D animation. Overwhelmed by the hulking, enraged Saiyan, both Vegeta and Goku, in one of the funniest moments of the film, pawn Broly off on Frieza before making their way to Piccolo somewhere else on Earth using instant transmission. This scene is pretty much ripped straight out of Fusion Reborn, and honestly, after all Vegeta has been through in Super with Goku, this scene didn't make sense to me. Vegeta, for whatever reason, still has a problem fusing with Goku. He understands that it's only 30 minutes, and he understands that he can't do it any other way. I just honestly can't understand this hang-up he has. He's just fought alongside Goku in the Tournament of Power as well as 30 seconds ago. He's even danced before to save his friends in Battle of Gods. Why is this, of all things, an issue for him? Simply put, because it gives them a chance to make jokes and to create fake tension. There's really no other reason. I would have preferred if Vegeta showed the emotional maturity to bring the idea forth to Goku first. That would have been interesting and a first for the character. Needless to say, the two of them agreed to fuse eventually, but all these botched fusion attempts basically translates to Frieza getting pummeled for the bones of about an hour before they eventually arrive, as the newly fused Gogeta makes his canon debut in the film. Now, after almost 90 minutes of the movie, having seen some of the most spectacular animation we've ever seen from the series, one would think that we've already seen all this film can show us. However, nothing could be further from the truth. The remainder of this fight is packed to bursting, with not only the best animation Dragon Ball has ever seen, but some of the best action animation I've ever seen, period. Naoto Shida contributes around 1 minute and 40 seconds of pure movement to the beginning of this fight, and it's spectacular. But seeing as this is an honest review, I do have one small gripe. While everything looks fantastic and clean, the fact that Naoto Shida is held in such high regard within the company he works for means that he gets to board his own section, which has one unfortunate side effect. He ends up repeating angles, techniques, and sequences almost exactly the same way over and over again. Multiple times during this sequence, I recognize the composition and ideas from earlier works in Super. I'm guessing this isn't something the regular viewer would even notice, but I did and I thought it worth mentioning. Regardless of this small gripe, I still love this spectacular cut of animation from the incredible Naoto Shida. Also within this section is the third and final CGI sequence, but honestly, it's the best one, and suits the dimensional shift both characters undergo. It's honestly stunning. Something also of note, once Gogeta turns Super Saiyan Blue, Broly never lands a hit on him after. While this phenomenal fight is taking place, my last major problem with the film rears its head. Chi Lai's desire to save Broly by putting her life at risk. This leap from her, while I understand it, seems a little premature. She already paid Broly back for standing up for her after she stole the remote away from Paragus. And while I believe that her and Broly have a fondness for one another that is believable, I find Chi Lai's particular decision here kind of unbelievable. This is a narrative thread that I thought could have greatly benefited from having more time exploring it. The film did make a concerted effort to build their relationship up in 3 separate scenes, and while I did love their Tarzan and Jane dynamic, they still only knew each other for a few hours. The remaining moments of the fight are again filled with some of the most spectacular animation I've ever seen from Dragon Ball, full of amazing choreography, callbacks to prior films, and character-rich moments. The final moments of the battle are made even more tense with the use of the Dragon Balls, causing the world to be shrouded in darkness. As Gogeta charges his final Kamehameha, Broly looks genuinely scared, like he's suddenly come out of a trance he's been in, and I sincerely really liked that inclusion. The wish is made to transport Broly back to home, all is back to normal once again, and the fight is over. And so, now that everything has been said and done, these are my final thoughts. This film really isn't perfect, and as I pointed out, has its shortcomings narratively. It isn't a flawless film, and while the first half does a fantastic job delivering exposition for first-time viewers, the second half really takes off the training wheels, going full force with its lore and combat. So while I think this is the most accessible Dragon Ball film to date, I still would assume that for most people unfamiliar with the series, prior knowledge of it is required to get a relatively mediocre level of enjoyment out of it when all is said and done. However, what did I think of it as a fan of the series? I've honestly never had more fun watching a film. To say that this movie takes you on a ride is an understatement of the highest order. The fan service, the characters, the story, the ridiculous action sequences and set pieces. It's plain as day that the animators, musicians, artists, writers, and everyone involved were going all out with this film. It's taken the best elements from Dragon Ball Minus, Broly the Legendary Super Saiyan, and Fusion Reborn to create a brand new story that is far superior than the sum of its parts. It's not a perfect film, and it has its problems, but the exceptionally great parts of this movie far outweigh its drawbacks, and I highly recommend anyone who hasn't seen it to experience it for themselves. Thanks for watching.